Welcome back. If you watched last week's episode, you know I had been deep in the Headley side of my family, specifically chasing my great-grandfather, John Stewart Headley, through Panama Canal passenger lists and Cuban birth records, trying to find out where this man actually came from before he showed up in Jamaica, married Mabel Blake, and became part of my story. The short version of last week, I hit a lot of walls. The Registrar General's department in Jamaica is still inaccessible remotely, and you have to go in person. A lead I had into Corsi Headley didn't survive the date check, and John himself frustratingly remains out of reach. And this is important. I have not opted. I'm actually sitting on something that I'm not ready to share yet because I need to confirm it first. You know how this goes. You get all excited about a name and you tell everyone, and then the dates don't line up and you have to walk it back. I'm not doing that again. Stay tuned on the Headleys. So they were free colored landowners in St. Elizabeth. And when I say free colored, I mean they occupied that very specific, very complicated middle ground in colonial Jamaican society. Mixed race, not enslaved, but not white either. A class of people who held property and who navigated a social system that was designed to keep them somewhere between the two worlds they came from. And this goes back generations. It all seems to start with a man named William Blake, who came over from England and almost immediately started mixing. His descendants became part of a network of land-owning families in St. Elizabeth that intermarried and interwove over and over again across the decades. And I find that very fascinating, complicated, and very, very Jamaican. Before I go further, I want to share something that has genuinely helped me this week. There's a book I keep returning to when I get stuck, and it's called Jamaican Genealogy Research by Vilma Ruddick. Dense book, good book. The kind of reference that earns its weight. And she has this one piece of advice that I keep coming back to. When you're lost to the last known ancestor you can actually find solid information on, use that person as your fixed point and rebuild outward from there. So for the Blakes, that fixed point is Mabel. So let's start with Mabel and work backward. According to my dad's notes, and I'm so grateful my dad started writing things down, Mabel's father was a man named James or Jimmy Blake. And we know that James was of color because it's actually noted in his baptism records. That's the colonial system doing its bureaucratic thing, classifying people by the color of their skin, which tells us something about who he was in the social order, even if it doesn't tell us anything about who he actually was as a person. Mabel's mother, James's wife, was a woman named Helen. Now that we have to talk about that surname because it's part of Jamaica in this era. A surname like White on a Black woman is almost certainly the inheritance of, at some point, an enslaver. And this is not always the case, but it is a pattern. Someone, somewhere in Helen's family tree was given that name or took that name because they had no other option, and it followed us. So a union of Blake and White gives us Mabel. Mabel marries Headley. They have Lucille. Lucille has my father has me. That's the chain. And every link of it, there's a story I'm still trying to find. The place that keeps coming up in this research is Comfort Hall. It's a former plantation in St. Elizabeth, and the Blakes were there, rooted in that specific soil, tied to that land, even though Mabel eventually ended up in Kingston. And I know that because her marriage certificate shows that she was married there. Family roots are in St. Elizabeth. I keep sitting with that tension, a family whose entire identity is bound up in one place, and yet over generations they scattered, moved, came back, moved again. The land stays and the people wander. What I want to find now, what I'm actively looking for, are Mabel's brothers and sisters, and I want to know much more about Helen Lemina White, who would be my great-great-grandmother, born around 1872, and there's a whole life there that I haven't found yet. But here is where it gets really interesting for me this week. So I've been looking at a land survey of Jamaica published in 1804 based on surveys done in the 1790s. And when I locate the Blake properties on the map, something becomes immediately clear. They are not isolated. The Blake are right next to the Mitchells and a woman named Frances Mitchell, and I will come back to her, eventually marries into the Blakes. The Blakes are also near the Wrights, who appear elsewhere in my family's bloodline. The Newmans are close by too, and the Newmans eventually merged with the Blakes, who had already merged with the Mitchell. All of these families, free, colored, mixed race, property, are all clustered together along the base of the Santa Cruz Mountains, near the Pot Gully River, along the ridge that St. Elizabeth shares with Manchester. So they were neighbors, they were business partners. They married each other's children over and over across generations. And up in those mountains, above all of them, fairly certain there were maroon communities living up there. The mountains were where you want to be if you didn't want to be found. And the land below was where you stayed if you managed to hold on to something. This is not a collection of coincidences. This is a deliberate, interwoven community of people who found each other and held on. That gives me chills, honestly, to look at an 18th century map and see the shape of your own family. Now, a word about dates, because the research has made me almost obsessive about them. Names repeat in St. Elizabeth the way certain melody tune different generations. There are Samuels everywhere. Joseph. You find a name that matches, you get excited, then you look at the year and you're 30 years off. You're looking at someone's grandfather. You may have to start over. I was actually contacted this week by a Blake. He found me through family tree research, messaging from DC, and his family tree absolutely intersects with mine. But what I thought was going to be a solid connection didn't survive the date except for one lead. One name where the dates line up exactly. Her name, Mitchell. She was a free Black woman. I'm now working outward from Frances, trying to find her siblings, trying to use her as a doorway into Joseph Samuel Blake. I'm looking for him in my family tree, and it is slow work, but it is the most promising thread I have right now on that side of the family. One more thing before I go, and this is something that's been sitting with me all week. Middle names. In this community, in this era, a middle name always means something. It was usually a maiden name or a family name or someone that you wanted to carry forward, a form of memory that didn't require paper. Just the daily fact of someone's full name spoken out loud year after year. How much of what mattered to these people survived, not in an archive, but in us, in the names we were given without knowing why. I keep thinking about that. Okay, next week, I'm gonna go deeper on Helen Lemina White. And if I've confirmed what I think I might have confirmed about the Headleys, I'll have something to tell you. But I'm not going to promise. If you haven't subscribed on Substack yet, do that. Leave me a comment if anything is resonating. If your family has roots in St. Elizabeth, if you hit the same walls I'm hitting, I want to hear from you. Until then, see you on the next one.